Welcome to another edition of Gov Tech Today. I'm Russell Lowery.
And I'm Jen Saha.
And together we try and bridge the gap between .com and .gov. Today we're teeing up the issue of AI, and you're not allowed to roll your eyes. It's buzzword and it's hype. It's not overly hyped. It is a massive change to how things are coming, and you know it's real when the state is actually implementing it. And we've gone from people talking about it all the time to actual state problems being addressed. So Jen, why don't you give the audience a little overview? Where is the state of California in its AI implementation journey?
Kind of leading the pack, which is awesome and a little scary because, I've been exposed to some national looks at generative AI, and like not even every state has really made it a focus. There are probably like 15 states that are like, we don't have a centralized approach to this. We're just kind of using it willy-nilly. And I think California very early on with some really strong and broad executive orders said, we're going to lead the way on this. And rightfully so, like we're California. So got out of the gate very quickly with a few pilot projects. These are those ones that are using the RFI, request for innovative ideas.
Why don't we, that's such a different procurement process.
Totally.
Why don't we, before we go into the projects and what it was, why don't you just describe this, how radically different this RFI squared process really is?
So instead of putting out, we want 5 licenses for this software and we want OpenAI or, telling the vendor community exactly what they want, they put out a problem statement. Hey, we need help dealing with traffic on our roadways. And we want the vendor community to bring their coolest, most innovative generative AI ideas to us, and we'll look at those. We'll pick a couple. We're not going to just pick one. There's not one winner on any of these projects.
Oh, I didn't realize. So there's multiple ideas for each of the projects.
Yeah. So for instance, the Caltrans Traffic Mobility Insights, they have a ton of data about state highway system. There's so much, it's sort of hard to find insights in that data. So they went out and evaluated if generative AI could help them to improve traffic patterns. Yay, everyone loves that, right? So they are actually working with a team from Accenture and a team from Deloitte, and they're in open procurement. They're paying them $1, which I know we talked about on this show certainly before. Not super realistic, but corporations the size of Deloitte and Accenture can sort of eat that cost. They're bringing them different models of how they see generative AI being able to solve this problem. So Caltrans has been in discussions with both of those teams and working on some projects to do a proof of concept. And at the end of that, which frankly should be anytime now, they're going to say, yep, this works. This is what we came up with. Maybe they like both of them. Maybe they run them side by side. Maybe they like one, the other one just didn't really sort out in the end of it. But the state has a number of these projects going on around government. And in fact, late last month, they rolled out another round of these. So now they're looking, in addition to the first round was things like, hey, our tax center needs call center productivity.
Right.
So they picked 2 companies to help them with that. Our language access in our Health and Human Services department needs some help. Like, what language tools are out there that generative AI can help with? Picked a couple companies to help them with that. So now there's new innovative concept papers due to the state for a few other places. So one of them is in our Housing and Community Development department. They're looking for ways to expedite plan reviews for local government housing elements. Hey, how can we compare these? Look at them from compare from 540 jurisdictions in California and track those jurisdictions' progress towards meeting those goals. So they put that out there. This is our problem. We're struggling with it. Another one is in labor and EDD. They're looking for help in aligning economic predictions for workforce. So there's all kinds of models out there. Can we use generative AI to help us pinpoint real economic numbers to enhance accuracy of industry projections on employment? There's even one for Department of Finance. So we've just filmed episodes on our state budget. The Department of Finance does a ton of legislative analysis. Departments all around state government do it too. Fiscal estimations on the impacts of this spending for this money. And they're wondering if there's a tool to help them do that. Can something else summarize the impacts of this legislation? And then we still have a human involved. So those are on the street. They're working right now. The industry is putting together their best ideas to give to the state on how they can solve some of these new problems.
And that is exciting, especially for a state. You work with legislators and policymakers around the country. Are they looking at California? Is that something where, I know we're leading, but is anyone following?
Yeah. So I'm speaking at a conference of state procurement officers. California's procurement teams will be involved, but this pulls from all 50 states. And I was going through the agenda the other day. I'm speaking on a panel related to like vendor risk assumption, super in the weeds, right. But that's me.
Yeah.
But there's so many topics on AI. What kind of terms and conditions do we need? How can we lay this out? How can we protect ourselves from risks, protect privacy? And what that tells me is that, yeah, the states are looking at this and they're looking really closely at California. In fact, our state procurement director, Angela Schell, is speaking on a session at the same exact time that I am on AI, because California really is leading the way.
So, and in California, it's labor has a voice and a seat at the table. They're respected partners by serious participants in this process. They have largely not felt threatened by the state's approach to AI. That so far it's a tool and a help and an assistant, but it's not displacing workers. At least so far that's been our experience. Are you surprised that labor's gone along? Do we expect that to change as it rolls out to more departments? What's the expectation there?
I mean, you see the concerns in like full-scale automation scenarios, like with our ports. There's a lot of pushback from labor when it comes to, hey, we're going to completely automate your job. I think the route that governments rightfully have to take is like a human involved backstop to any of these. So in every decision that's been made on AI, we've basically said they won't be making the decision. A human will be there. There will be a human involved in any decision that AI is recommending for our government leadership. And I think that's sort of how you mitigate that risk. Because what that says to me is they're still going to need a human. They're still going to need a person. But that person's life is going to be so much easier, right? Their job is going to be so much better because they can focus on the things they need to focus on instead of all that busy work.
Well, and I've talked to some agencies, and you've got this pressure from a governor who's committed to working hard right to the end to maximize every minute of his gubernatorial office, but he's pushing, and not everyone is AI ready. If your data is garbage, if you haven't gotten yourself to the point where you want to, they're scared to do it, and no one wants to tell the governor and his appointees no. So that conversation is going on. Have you seen people doing data initiatives or data cleansing projects or moving stuff to the cloud and doing some re-engineering? And it's data hygiene work, but it's also AI readiness work.
Yeah.
Can you?
That's where I'm a little nervous, honestly, and a little scared. And the National Association of State CIOs said that yes, data hygiene is incredibly important. And then they asked the follow-up question, how many of you are doing data hygiene? And I'm pulling this out of my memory, but it was north of 70% of states did not have data hygiene initiatives going on.
Wow.
And way more of those states are doing AI. And like, it's the whole garbage in, garbage out principle of it, which is like, can we even effectively implement generative AI if we don't have our ducks in a row on data first? And that frankly terrifies me. Like we've worked in government, we know where a lot of these data sets are, and it is a little scary, but I think it speaks more for having a human involved, right? Like you need someone to, even when you or I use AI, like you have to kind of gut check what it's giving you.
Right.
Because you're like, this doesn't make sense. This is complete garbage. Like, I don't know where they pulled this from, but right. Hey, OpenAI, you got it wrong. Like, right. Hey, Grok, you're a little off on this one. Like, humans still have to be involved. And I think that's probably even more important when you're in government and you're letting this AI sort of point you in some directions for policy decisions that are going to have impacts on people's lives.
I think the way we're pulling together a few different tools to give to departments. No one wants to say our data's trash. No one. Your baby's ugly. Your baby's ugly. No one wants to say that. And AI is the hot buzzy topic, and it's being pushed by the governor. So if we can put the basic blocking of and tackling of data hygiene into an AI readiness bucket, yep. And give people a data maturity process. So when I think of data maturity, it's just an assessment of where you are. What condition is your data in? How are you storing it? How are you securing it? How are you networked and communicating and interacting with it? So if you've got these protocols in place and you can benchmark against where other state agencies are, it can give you a roadmap on what do you need to do next. Yeah. And maybe this portion of your data is good to go for an AI product, a project. But if you don't know that, or you don't know what the next step is, then a great first step is a data maturity assessment.
I think that's a really good point. And it's reminding me, the state has a risk assessment model built into any department that's going to use generative AI. It's a part of the process. Are you using generative AI? Yes. Assess the risk of using generative AI. And when you look at that risk sort of questionnaire, it's not about the generative AI. It's about your data, because that's really where the biggest risk is. And I think the state has sort of recognized that. And look, if your data's in bad shape, your risk is automatically higher, right? Which means more eyes on it, maybe even pause it or slow roll it until you can get a data maturity model in place.
And I think it also relates to another state mandate as more and more data is moving to the cloud. I think it's a legitimate question that if you have some data that no one's accessed for 20 years, do you really need to spend or can you cold storage that or store it in a cheaper, more efficient way than moving all of that and all the work it takes to migrate that to the cloud? And then every time you query data, you're now querying everything, which slows you down, instead of just querying the data that's necessary for the most up-to-date, accurate response. No one's saying get rid of your data.
More isn't always better, right?
Or just storing it in the most efficient, most efficient way possible. I'm aware of a state agency that was storing data that they rarely accessed, and they were storing it multiple times in multiple different platforms and just paying for all of that.
And that makes me as a taxpayer so furious.
Right. And it happens, and this stuff builds up over time. And if you haven't done that sort of assessment, people may not be aware of these gaps. And so
Well, I would also point those people to records retention policies. So I became more familiar than I would ever want to with these records retention policies when I worked at DGS. But part of those isn't just what you should keep, and it's for how long. And frankly, it's what you shouldn't keep. And like why you shouldn't keep it, because it's cost prohibitive, because it's not adding any value to our decisions today.
It's also a security risk. It's a more valuable treasure trove.
It's absolutely a security risk. I mean, I remember walking into a records room at DGS, which I kid you not was just like files from floor to ceiling, and all paper files too. This was like we're storing things in the cloud. And I'm just like, why are we keeping this stuff? Like, when's the last time you even opened this file cabinet? And they were like, oh, it's been decades. And I'm like, guys, real estate is expensive. Right. Like, land is the one finite resource that we have here. Like, what are we doing? So, I mean, and I'm like, if the attorneys knew you were keeping this, like, that's another thing. If I Public Records Act something, all of that is subject to public records requests. And I guarantee you no one's thumbing through the thousands of pages to make sure we don't have something that's responsive. I mean, I think it's kind of the records retention thing is a double-edged sword, right? Like if you keep it, you have to be accountable for it.
Right.
And if you don't keep it, you have to be accountable for why you didn't keep it.
So coming back to the AI focus, have you brought, when you think about how we're handling data and you look at maybe 8 or 9 projects that will be implemented, and with multiple on each one of those, we'll have several instances that have been proven, that have sign off from CDT. Are you expecting a growth in those in 2025, 2026?
I think it's already happening.
Okay.
And I think it's, you don't have to be one of these 6 project use cases to be able to implement generative AI in the state. And I'm already getting calls from people that are like, hey, we think generative AI could really be helpful in this use case. And I'm like, well, you should send it to CDT, but also you should just do it. Like the guardrails are in place now in California. We have procurement language, we have terms and conditions, we have processes and forms that will sort of uphold those guardrails. So like, yeah, let's just do it. Let's not wait for the next round of proof of concepts and RFI squareds. Like, let's just get some stuff in here and figure out how to do it. And I think that's happening too. It's happening at those departments, though, that do sort of think outside the box and maybe have their data in a bit better of a place. Because no one, if you know you have an ugly baby, you're not going to raise your hand to be like, come and judge my baby, right? So I'm seeing it here and there, and I'm seeing it in some of the more innovative, forward-thinking departments that are like, hey, I use this at home. Like, this could really help me in my office, too.
Right.
And I love that. Like, that's where we're really going to see a turning point in the growth is when it's widely adopted, still within the guardrails, still private, but it's happening everywhere, not just in these, 12 projects. I'm
excited about what this holds. We've used it in our business every day for at least the last year plus in our office, and not that it was always useful, but it was a learning experience.
We use this on this podcast.
Yes, right, exactly.
Yeah, the clips, they are AI recommended clips, right?
Right, but it's staying at the front of the learning curve, and I know just from our process that the use cases are better and better and better every single day. We were looking at some AI agents for a variety of different tasks, and some more technically sophisticated people on the staff suggested that they were going to be dated. They're trying to get annual contracts because the agent that's really cool today is going to be outdated in 3 months.
Wow.
And so, but they're actually doing things now. So I'm excited about what it means for state services, and hopefully it's a benefit to both taxpayers, but also the public who's receiving the services.
Absolutely.